All right, so you should have completed the entire cross contour. You should have taken and erased out all your values. You should have also included little light lines that indicate where your shadows are, so you know where the edges are. And now we're ready to add value. The first thing I want to do is recognize where my values are, such as the background is pretty much all black, which means I don't have to think about the black background too much. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't require you to think a lot. It doesn't require a lot of effort to put it in. Although we do want a smooth value, it is just black. So I'm not going to do that first and waste my time doing that. We're going to start with our tones and our tints. That's our gray values and our light gray values. All right, so lights and grays. So when I notice, of course, that the background is black, I also notice that starting in this plate, I'm going to start in the background and move forward. The plate has a very light edge going around the sides. So I created double lines to show where that's going to be. I'm going to leave that the inside of that double line part white. The inside part of the plate, however, is a gray value. So like light gray, and then of course it's kind of darker in this corner and fades out. So what I'm going to do is hold my pencil in a nice sketching direction either way, but you're kind of using the side of the lead, and we're going to lightly fill in this whole area with gray. So let's go ahead and do that. You want to try to keep an even tone. You'll notice that I'm using broad strokes. I'm only slowing down and being very careful when I get to the smaller areas, such as this little area above the jar. As I'm adding value, I'm also recognizing that my cross contour is not consistent of a whole lot of really dark lines. I want to create these edges with value and not with a black outline. Make this an even tone. You'll notice that I'm using broad strokes and I'm going from one side of the plate all the way to the other side and mostly filling in the gaps. And then when I change directions, I'm also still going over that entire area. I'm not just filling in the part that I'm missing, but I'm making sure that the value is an even tone so that it's all blending together. And by doing that, I'm taking these directions and going all the way over. So horizontally, going all the way down from the top to bottom. Vertically, going all the way across from left to right. I am not holding my pencil really close to the edge like I'm writing a letter, because I want to keep a nice soft value to start out with. Once I get this nice gray value, then I'm going to this corner up here where it seems to be darker. And it does, once you start making this darker gray, it's going to really make the light edge of the plate show more. And that's purposeful. I don't want to have a black outline there, so I want to make sure that value blends out to that line. So as I come in creating that value on that line, I want to make that a sharp edge, but it's made sharp with gray, not black. And as I add that darker value, I want to make sure I keep it blended. So again, I'm using verticals, I'm using horizontals, and I'm going all the way through the dark area that I want to be the shadow. I may use vertical lines, I may use horizontal lines, I may use a circular motion. All of those directions to keep a nice blend of value. I'm always remembering I can get darker at all times. So I'm not hard pressed to jump into a dark value. These are my tones and my tints. My light grays and my middle grays. As you bring this gray down, what you start noticing, we're gonna start with this little small bowl that's here. I'm gonna add the value to it. Now what you'll notice is the edge of that bowl is not a black outline. you see that the edge of it is a very light, it's pretty much white. Then there's a kind of a dark shadow here at the very top, and it kind of creates a value kind of down the center. But before we get inside of this, we notice that the outline, to create that outline, is the gray value of the plate up next to the white. So what we want to do is go right up to our outline, and we want to blend that out into our plate value. So what it does is it eliminates the outline look. So I'm very lightly going around the edges, making sure that the gray value takes on that edge. And I let it blend back out into the plate value. All right, so when I get ready to start actually drawing these objects, because it has these polka dots, I'm gonna start with the actual polka dot itself. And when I notice them, in the actual colored picture, the polka dots are different colors. You have some red ones, some burgundy ones, some blue ones, some brown ones, some orange ones. Translated to black and white, you have various values of these circles. Not all of them are the same value. So I want to caution you that you don't make them all black dots. All right, so what we'll start with is like a gray value. Now the edge of each one of these circles should be a nice, even, clean line. And right now I'm just gonna kind of shade inside of it, making a nice even tone, just to give them all like a gray value. The gray value allows me to then go back in and darken up the circles I need to darken up, as well as adding in the variety of values that you see within the circles because of the shadows and light and reflections. So we're just starting off by giving each polka dot a light gray value. Some of y'all who do have your values and working, some of y'all are getting a little too dark. Be careful not to get too dark. If you do get dark, take your eraser and just kind of press it on those dark areas, and it kind of lightens up your value without completely smearing or just erasing away cleanly. You can just kind of press a nice clean eraser. You can also erase on the side of your paper just to clean some of the pencil off of your eraser and use that. All right, inside the white part of this little bowl, there's a nice dark shadow. The very top is still very white, and then there's a really strong shadow that comes in about here. So I'm gonna put that really strong shadow in here. And then as I work my way down, I'll let it blend out into this area. Now, the great thing about the little lines that we used initially is that they kind of show me where my shadow is gonna go and where it's gonna end. So I can value based on those little lines that I used. I know this whole little area is gonna be dark. Again, I start off gray and I can increasingly get darker where I need to. Now something interesting happens because this whole thing is ceramic, it all has a reflection. The polka dots actually are, the value of the polka dots has changed based on the shadow. So inside this polka dot, it gets a little darker on the side. I actually see a reflection of a polka dot from the jar, so I'm kind of adding that into this dot. As well as darkening that dot because it's a little bit darker than what the light gray is that I started with. For some of you all, it might be easier for these little details to use a mechanical pencil, which is fine. And it's also easier once you have a nice base value of gray to work with the mechanical pencil. You want to make sure those values go all the way to those very light lines without leaving an outline. You want the value to stand alone. All right, as we move into the next object, it's kind of the same process. I'm gonna start Now these polka dots, I noticed there are some much lighter polka dots. But again, I'm gonna start by taking my polka dots and creating a nice light value. This time I'm using a mechanical pencil so you can see it's kind of very much the same. So I'm just going through all of my polka dots and kind of giving them a light value. As I create this value, I want to make sure that the polka dots don't still have a black outline. So if I have a really dark, heavy cross contour with those dots, it may be beneficial for you just to erase it. You can still see your circle and then like shade it in instead of like putting an outline on it and then valuing it out. So I'm just adding in the light gray. You'll notice that over here, this one is like super, super light. So that means that most of this I won't really change. Matter of fact, that outline is probably too dark for that. So I'm gonna lightly erase it out and then put it back with just the value. That way I don't have an outline on that polka dot. All right, so just like before, once I got the value in there, I can then start in with my shade area. So I still have these light lines in here that show me where my shadows are gonna be. And so I'm gonna very lightly start creating those shadows. Now here's one thing that I noticed. This bowl on this left side is actually darker than the background. The background's lighter in this area. Can everybody see that? So both of these objects are actually darker than the background in this particular area. Unlike up here where the background is darker. So what I need to do is make sure that the edge of this bowl is actually darker than the background. So I made a nice darkness on the edge and I'm letting it blend into the shadow inside of this bowl. So again, I'm putting in a light gray for my shadow. I can always go back in and make it darker. Now one thing I do notice about the shadow is it's very, very dark in this area where I lined it out, but it also blends. So this is where I'm gonna start creating my blend. So I have to actually, for this part, go outside of the line that I created and actually let it blend out to a lighter value. Now how much that blends out is really up to you because the light is so strong, there is actually white in this cup. So I want to blend that light gray out and just kind of let it fade off. How far it fades is based upon your vision of how much it fades. One thing to remember is we're not computers, so it's not ever going to be exact. And even though you may look at somebody else's drawing and say, man, that looks really, really good, looks just like the picture, that person that drew it is going to say, I didn't really get this part to look the way I wanted. Now, as an artist, I wouldn't tell anybody that. And I advise you to, be confident in what you do. Just know that you can't make it exact. But as long as you're drawing something that is based on something you observe, not that you just made up in a drawing like this, then it works. Now, one thing that I'm noticing is as I start darkening my shadow, I'm losing my polka dots, which are obviously darker than the shadow on the white part of the bowl. So that means I have to go back in and bring out my polka dots, which I knew I would have to do because we start off light. I can always get darker. And these polka dots aren't just a solid color. They're darker in some areas and they blend out to a lighter value. Some are almost all the way dark, which is fine. Underneath this object, we have the shadows. We have the little table it's sitting on. So we can come down here. And it does, because this object is sitting right on the table, it does kind of create what basically resembles a line. So we're going to add that line in. If yours is light, then you want to add it in. If it's not light, then you want to darken it up. I mean, leave it the way you have it. Don't darken it up too much. And as it comes in here where you have a shadow, there's a little cast shadow down here. So we want to start by shading that cast shadow area gray. So I know where my cast shadow is going to be, right in between these two objects. Now what we'll notice is right along the side of this actual bowl we just drew, it's really, really dark along the side, just like we did right in here. So we're going to make this side dark and blend it in to our bowl. And I'm using a mechanical pencil because it's a small little area and I want to keep my values on the inside of my bowl. So I am using my mechanical pencil to create it. And then let it blend out. The bottom here is much darker in here than it is out here because the shadow is much stronger. So since the light is coming from this direction, everything on this side will be a little darker. All of this section is white, and then down here you have what goes back to what's really close to being your black value. Right now, just so we kind of finish this whole side, I'm just going to lightly, I know I'm going to go back and make this all dark later, but I'm going to go ahead and make it a gray value just so we can kind of see this. And this line should be a nice clean edge. It shouldn't be a rough, uneven line, so if your lines are kind of jagged, you're kind of nervous putting it in, breathe, take your time, and try to extend your line little by little, keeping it the same line. Try to control your hand, your motor skills. And broad strokes to fill it in. The shorter, tight your strokes are when adding value to large areas, the more apparent and uneven it looks. So when you're shading a big area, you want to use broader, longer strokes. And I don't have to press really hard. I can always get darker. So I'm not like pressing the hole through my paper. I'm just kind of shading it in. The more I shade in the area, the darker it gets. I can definitely make that value darker. And I will later on. I'm also going to come along the side here. And because this is I want this to be nice and clean, I'm taking my time, not moving very quickly. Getting around the edges, around those lines, make sure they're sharp. Now once I fill in that area, then I can start my bolder strokes. And I can blend this area in. The only time I'm really slowing down is when I get right near the plate because I want that edge to be a clean line. There's no confusion on the black background and the edge of that plate. So I don't want it to be confusion on my drawing either. I want it to be a nice sharp line. I do not want a black outline, so I'm making sure I blend that value into the background, which is dark as well. Broad strokes, longer the smoother. Change your directions. Use a circular motion. All right, so just like yesterday, when we start on this jar, I always like to start with the polka dots. They're the kind of darkest area. Again, there are various values of these circles. So as you shade them in, we're not gonna shade them in solid black. We're gonna shade them in at a value, and then we can always darken it up later.